3 months had passed since the trial in the arena. Marcus stood at the observation deck of Nexus Prime and watched the Thesari shuttle dock at the station. Its sleek blue hull reflected the light of distant stars as it settled into the landing bay. He still wore his eye patch, but the scar tissue beneath it no longer ached the way it used to. Something had healed inside him that went deeper than flesh. The corridor behind him filled with the sound of footsteps and excited voices. A group of young aliens from half a dozen different species hurried past, chattering about the arrival of the Thesari diplomatic delegation. 6 months ago, those same species might have mocked the four-eyed visitors. Now they were eager to see them. Things had changed since the trial. Lord Torvus had been sentenced to 15 years in a rehabilitation facility for attempted murder, evidence tampering, and false accusation. His assets had been seized and distributed to those he had harmed over the years. The list of victims had been surprisingly long, but more importantly, the story of what happened in the arena had spread. Across the sector, news channels on 100 worlds had broadcast the footage of a one-eyed human standing between a scared girl and a murderous merchant. They had shown Marcus taking the energy bowl and refusing to fall. They had captured the moment when Una reached for his hand. The galaxy had watched and something had shifted. Not everyone had changed their minds, of course. Prejudice did not disappear overnight. But enough people had looked at that footage and seen themselves in Marcus. Or in Una. Enough people had felt ashamed of their own quick judgments. Enough people had decided to try seeing differently. Marcus heard familiar footsteps approaching and turned to find Una walking toward him. She wore the formal robes of a Thesari ambassador now. Deep blue fabric embroidered with silver thread that caught the light as she moved. Her 4 violet eyes sparkled with happiness when she saw him. "Marcus," she said, "I hoped you would come to see us off. Would not miss it." Una had been officially appointed as the Thesari liaison to the Galactic Medical Research Coalition. Her species' unique visual abilities had proven even more valuable than anyone had expected. They could detect diseases in their earliest stages by perceiving wavelengths of light that other species could not see. The Malori physicians who had spoken up during the trial had championed the partnership. Now the Thesari healers were being requested on medical stations across the sector. "The shuttle leaves in an hour," Una said. "I wanted to thank you again before I go." Marcus shook his head. "You have thanked me enough." "I have not," she insisted. "I can never thank you enough. You changed everything for my people." "No," Marcus said gently. "You changed everything. I just stood in the right place at the right time." Una smiled at him with all 4 of her eyes. It still looked strange to humans who had not spent time with Thesari. But Marcus had learned to read her expressions. He could see the gratitude, and the affection, and the hope for the future. "Will you keep doing it?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Standing in the right place at the right time." Marcus thought about the question. After the trial, other humans had started reaching out to him. Some of them had been inspired by what they saw and wanted to do something similar. Others had stories of their own. Times when they had been overlooked or dismissed or treated as less because of how they looked. A loose network had formed. Humans and other species who committed to stepping forward when they saw someone being treated unfairly. They did not have a name or a formal structure. They were just people who had decided that seeing clearly meant more than looking away. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think I will." Una reached into her robes and pulled out a small object. It was a crystal pendant on a silver chain, carved in the shape of an eye. "This is a gift from my people," she said. "A reminder that true sight comes not from how many eyes you have, but from what you choose to look at." Marcus took the pendant and held it up to the light. The crystal caught the starlight and scattered it into a rainbow of colors. "Thank you," he said. "Put it on." He slipped the chain over his head and tucked the pendant under his shirt where it rested against his chest. It was cool and smooth and lighter than he expected. "I have to go," Una said. but I will send you messages, and when I return to the station, I expect you to tell me all the stories of the people you have helped. That is a lot of messages. I have time." She stepped forward and embraced him carefully, mindful of his shoulder. Even though it had fully healed, her 4 eyes closed as she hugged him. "Thank you," she whispered one more time. Then she stepped back and walked toward the shuttle bay. Marcus watched her go. Just before she disappeared through the boarding gate, she turned and waved. He raised his hand in return. The shuttle departed 20 minutes. Later, Marcus watched it climb away from the station and accelerate toward the jump point that would carry it across the sector when it was gone. He turned and made his way back toward the cargo docks. He still had work to do. The loading bay was busy as always. Crates moved on automated platforms while workers directed traffic and checked. Manifest Marcus collected his datapad and prepared to start his shift, but something was different as he walked past other workers. They nodded at him. Some of them smiled. A Dranaki dock supervisor, the same species as the witness who had been pressured to lie during the trial, stopped him with a gentle touch on the arm. "Marcus Cole," the supervisor said, "I wanted to tell you something." "What is that?" "My nephew was on the tribunal viewing floor the day of the trial," the Dranaki said. "He saw what you did, and last week he testified in a case against his employer who's mistreating migrant workers." The supervisor's small eyes met Marcus's single one. He said he kept thinking about the one-eyed human who was not afraid to stand up. Marcus did not know what to say. "Thank you," the Dranaki continued, "for showing him what courage looks like." The supervisor walked away before Marcus could respond. He stood in the cargo bay for a long moment around him. The station continued its endless business of trade and transport, and the 1,000 small interactions that made up daily life somewhere out there. Una was traveling toward her new assignment somewhere else. Humans and aliens were standing up for people who could not stand up for themselves. And here, in a busy loading dock on a space station far from Earth, a cargo handler with one eye touched the crystal pendant under his shirt and smiled. He had spent most of his life being invisible. He had spent years believing that one person could not change anything. He had been wrong. The galaxy was vast and full of beings who looked at each other with fear and suspicion, but it was also full of beings who were waiting for permission to be better. Sometimes all they needed was someone to go first. Marcus picked up his datapad and got back to work. There was cargo to haul. There were people to meet, and somewhere out there, there was probably someone standing alone in an arena, waiting for a champion to step forward. He would be ready. The energy bolt struck Marcus in the left shoulder and spun him halfway around. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and overwhelming. But his legs did not buckle. He had been hurt before. He had felt bones break and flesh tear, and his own eye destroyed in his skull. This was just pain. Pain could be endured. He stayed on his feet and kept himself. Between Torva's and Una, blood was soaking through his worn work shirt, mixing with the charred edges of the wound where the energy had burned through behind him. Una screamed his name in front of him. Torva's was already adjusting his aim for a second shot. Then station security finally reached them. A dozen armored officers swarmed the arena floor and tackled the Reckon merchant before he could fire again. The weapon was knocked from his claws and restraints were locked around his wrists. Torvas roared in fury, his massive body thrashing against the officers who held him. "You will regret this," he screamed. "I have friends in the council. I have connections that reach across the entire sector. You have nothing," the arbiter declared from above. Attempted murder in a tribunal arena carries mandatory penalties, regardless of wealth or status. Marcus let himself sway slightly as the immediate danger. Past his shoulder was a mess of pain and damaged tissue, and he knew he needed medical attention soon, but he did not want to move until he was certain Yuna was safe. Is she okay? He asked. His voice rough Yuna appeared at his side, her 4 eyes filled with tears. I'm fine, she said. You protected me. That was the idea. Medical personnel pushed through the crowd and began examining his wound. They spoke in rapid technical language about tissue damage and nerve involvement, and the need for immediate surgery. Marcus let them work. He was tired, more tired than he had felt in years. The Arbiter descended from the floating platform and approached Marcus directly. Human, the Senate said. Your actions today have been recorded and will be entered into the permanent tribunal archives. Great, Marcus muttered. More paperwork. You do not understand, the Arbiter continued. What you did here will be seen by every world in the Concord. A one-eyed cargo handler stood against a powerful merchant and won. That story will spread far beyond this station. Marcus looked at the Arbiter with his single eye. I did not do it for stories. No, the Arbiter agreed. You did it because it was right. And that is precisely why the story matters. The medical team lifted Marcus onto a hovering stretcher and began moving in toward the arena exit. Yuna walked alongside, her 4 eyes never leaving his face. Will he survive? She asked the medics. Humans are remarkably durable, one of them replied. The wound is serious but not fatal. He will require several days of treatment and recovery. Yuna let out a breath she seemed to have been holding since the weapon discharged. As they passed through the arena corridors, Marcus noticed other beings watching him. Aliens of a dozen different species pressed against the barriers to get a better look at the human who had been shot defending. And the Zari, some of them had been laughing at Yuna just an hour ago. Now, they looked at Marcus with something that might have been shame. He closed his eye and let the medics carry him away. From the crowd, the medical facility on Nexus Prime was efficient, if not comfortable. They repaired the damage to his shoulder using techniques that would have seemed like magic. Back on Earth, synthetic tissue was bonded to natural flesh. Damaged nerves were stimulated back to function. Within 6 hours, Marcus could move his arm again, though the doctors warned him to avoid heavy lifting for at least a week. Yuna stayed in the waiting area the entire time. When Marcus emerged from the treatment room, she was sitting in a chair designed for a species much larger than her own. Her 4 eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but she smiled when she saw him. You should be resting, she said. Sitting here is resting. She shook her head. Humans are strange. You have no idea. They sat together in silence for a while. The medical facility was quiet at this hour, and the corridor lights had dimmed to simulate the station's artificial night cycle. Finally, Yuna spoke. Again, why did you really do it? Marcus considered the question. When I was young, he said. There was a woman in my neighborhood who had been in an accident. Her face was scarred badly, and people avoided her. They crossed the street when they saw her coming. He paused and touched his eye patch. I was one of those people, he admitted. I was afraid of how she looked, and so I convinced myself she must be scary in other ways too. Yuna's 4 eyes watched him intently. Years later, after my own accident, I saw her again, Marcus continued. She was older then, and I was older too. But I still remembered how I used to avoid her. He turned to face Yuna directly. She told me something that day, he said. She told me that the world would always have people who looked at difference and saw danger. And the only way to change that was for people to choose to see differently. He gestured toward her 4 eyes. When I saw you standing in that arena, surrounded by thousands of people who had already decided you were guilty just because of how you looked, I remembered that woman. Yuna reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cool and slim against his rough palm. Thank you, she said again. Not just for saving me, but for seeing me. Marcus nodded slowly. Your people, he said. You said you came here hoping to find friends? Yes. Well, he said, you found at least one. The door to the waiting area opened and a delegation of Dasari entered. They were the first of her kind that Marcus had seen besides Yuna. All of them with the same 4 violet eyes arranged in diamond patterns on pale blue faces. The oldest among them approached and spoke in heavily accented Galactic Common. We are the Council of the Dasari vessel, she said. We came to thank the human who defended our daughter. I did not know she was someone important. The old Dasari smiled. All our children are important, she said. But Yuna is the daughter of our ship's commander. She was supposed to be an ambassador for our people. Marcus looked at Yuna with new appreciation. Ambassador, huh? Yuna looked embarrassed. I did not tell you because I did not want you to think you had to protect me for political reasons. I did not protect you for any reasons except the right ones. The elder Dasari stepped forward and placed her hand on Marcus's undamaged shoulder. Human, she said. You have given us hope that this galaxy might have room for people like us, after all. We will not forget what you did. Marcus was uncomfortable with the gratitude. He had never been good at being thanked. Just treat people fairly, he said. That is all the thanks I need. The Dasari delegation departed after a few more minutes of formal expressions of gratitude when they were gone. Yuna turned to Marcus with an unreadable expression on her face. You really meant that, she said. You did not do this for reward or recognition. No. Then what will you do now? Marcus shrugged with his good shoulder. Go back to work. I suppose cargo does not haul itself. Yuna shook her head. I do not think that will be possible. Why not? She pointed toward the window that looked out onto the station corridor. A crowd had gathered outside the medical facility. Dozens of aliens of various species were waiting. Some holding recording devices, others simply watching. Word has spread, Yuna said. Everyone on the station knows what happened in the arena today. Everyone knows what the one-eyed human did for the four-eyed girl. Marcus looked at the crowd and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. It took him a moment to recognize it as hope. The Arbiter raised both appendages and called for silence. But it took several long minutes before the crowd settled enough for the trial to continue. Marcus stood in the center of the arena and waited. He had presented his case, and now everything depended on whether the Arbiter would accept the truth or bend to the pressure of wealth and influence. Lord Torvus had not spoken since the revelation about the manifest. The Vrecken merchant stood rigid and still, his golden eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that promised violence. But when he finally spoke, his voice was calm and measured. The human sees patterns where none exist, Torvus said. He weaves conspiracy from coincidence and expects us to believe that I, a respected member of the Merchant Coalition, would fabricate evidence against a worthless refugee. He gestured toward Yuna with one massive clawed hand. Look at her, he continued, his voice rising so the entire arena could hear. Look at those unnatural eyes, and tell me she's not exactly the kind of creature who would steal. Some in the crowd murmured agreement. Old prejudices did not disappear simply because logic challenged them. Torvus pressed his advantage. Our people arrive uninvited in our space, he said. They look at us with those disturbing eyes that see things we cannot see, and we are supposed to trust them. We are supposed to welcome them into our stations and our markets as if they belong here. More voices joined in agreement now. Marcus could feel the mood shifting back toward hostility. It was easier to hate than to think. Easier to blame than to question, Arbiter, Torvus said, turning to face the floating platform. I ask you to consider not just this single case, but what it represents. If we allow four-eyed aliens to rob us without consequence, what message does that send to others who might follow? The Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Marcus knew that the Zenith were supposed to be impartial, but supposed to be and actually being were very different things. Even judges had fears and ambitions and debts that could be called due. The evidence presented by the champion is compelling, the arbiter finally said. But so is the principle that accusations from respected members of society deserve weight. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This was going wrong. The arbiter was looking for a way to split the difference, to find some middle path that would avoid offending the powerful merchant while acknowledging the holes in his case. I propose a compromise, the arbiter continued. The accused will be released, but required to remain on Nexus Prime for a period of 1 standard year under supervised observation. No, Marcus said. The word came out before he could stop it. Loud enough to echo through the arena, every eye turned to him again. That is not justice, Marcus said. That is cowardice dressed up in legal language. The arbiter's expression hardened. You forget your place. Human. My place is right here, Marcus replied. Defending someone who cannot defend herself against a lie. He turned to face the crowd, spreading his arms wide. You all laughed at her eyes, he said. You called her unnatural and disturbing. But what is really unnatural here? He pointed at the holographic evidence still floating in the air. Is it unnatural to have 4 eyes? Or is it unnatural to fake documents and bribe witnesses and twist the law to destroy an innocent person? Someone in the crowd shouted something offensive about humans, but Marcus ignored it. I have only 1 eye, he said. And I have been mocked for that my entire life. People look at my face and they see something wrong, something broken, and they assume that because I am different, I am also less. He walked toward Yuna and stood beside her. She has 4 eyes, he continued. And you have made the same assumptions about her. But here's what I know about eyes. He paused and looked out at the thousands of faces watching him. It does not matter how many you have, he said. What matters is what you choose to see. And most of you have chosen to see a monster because that was easier than seeing a scared young girl who just wanted to make friends. The arena had gone quiet again. It was a different kind of quiet this time. Uncomfortable and thoughtful, Marcus reached up and removed his eye patch. The crowd reacted with gasps and murmurs as they saw the scarred tissue where his left eye had once been. It was not a pretty sight. The mining accident had done significant damage, and the surgery that followed had not been concerned with appearance. I lost this eye saving someone's life, Marcus said. And after I lost it, everyone looked at me differently. They saw the scar and the empty socket, and they forgot that I was the same person I had always been. He turned to face Lord Torvis. You see her 4 eyes, and you see an opportunity, he said. Someone to blame, someone nobody will defend. Someone whose differences make her an easy target. Torvis's calm facade was cracking. Scales along his jaw rippled with suppressed rage. I see something different, Marcus continued. I see someone who traveled across the stars, hoping to find a place where she belonged. And I see a galaxy that has decided she does not deserve that chance. A voice rose from somewhere in the middle tiers of seating. The human speaks truth. Marcus looked up and saw a Mallory physician standing, her 4-armed form draped in the ceremonial robes of the medical guild. I have studied the Thesari since their arrival, the Mallory said. Their 4 eyes can perceive wavelengths of light that no other known species can see. They could revolutionize medical diagnostics if we would only give them the chance. Another voice joined in, this time from the Navigation Guild section. Their visual range could improve stellar cartography by orders of magnitude, a Keth navigator declared. We have been too busy mocking them to recognize the gifts they offer. More voices followed. Scientists and researchers who had been too afraid to speak now found courage in numbers. The tide was turning. Marcus watched Lord Torvis and saw the moment when the merchant realized he had lost. It was there in the tightening of his jaw and the way his claws extended slightly from their sheaths, dangerous signs. Arbiter? Marcus said loudly. I call for a verdict. The Zenith Arbiter had been watching the shifting mood of the crowd. The path of least resistance had changed, based on the evidence presented and the testimony given. The Arbiter announced, I find the accused innocent of all charges. The arena exploded in noise again. But this time, it was different. There was applause mixed with the shouting. Approval alongside the protests. Una grabbed Marcus's arm with both hands, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief. Thank you, she said, her voice breaking. Thank you. Thank you. But Marcus was not looking at her. He was looking at Torvis. The Vrecken merchant had not moved since the verdict. He stood, perfectly still in a way that reminded Marcus of a predator preparing to strike. Then Torvis smiled. It was not a defeated smile. It was the smile of someone who had decided that if he could not win within the rules, he would simply break them. His hand moved toward the ornamental sash across his chest. Marcus had worked the docks long enough to recognize a concealed weapon when he saw one. Get behind me, he said to Una. She did not argue. Torvis pulled a compact energy pistol from beneath his sash and aimed it directly at them. The crowd screamed and scattered security personnel began pushing through the chaos, but they were too far away. If I cannot have justice through law, Torvis snarled, I will have it through blood. Marcus pushed Una further behind him and faced the weapon without flinching. He had been afraid many times in his life. He had been afraid when the tunnel collapsed. He had been afraid when the doctors told him his eye could not be saved. But right now, in this moment, he felt nothing but certainty. He would not let this girl die. Not today. Go ahead, Marcus said, his voice steady. Show everyone exactly who you really are. Torvis pulled the trigger. Marcus made his way down from the upper galleries, and the crowd parted around him like water flowing around a stone. Nobody wanted to get too close to the one-eyed human who had just done something so incredibly foolish. He could hear their whispers as he passed. Questions about who he was and why he would involve himself in the affairs of a species nobody cared about. He ignored all of it and kept walking. By the time he reached the arena floor, Lord Torvis had recovered from his initial surprise and was now laughing openly in his viewing box. This is your champion, the Vrecken merchant called out, his voice booming through the amplification system. This broken human with only half a face. More laughter rippled through the crowd, though it was more uncertain than before humans were known throughout the galaxy, but they rarely involved themselves in other species' problems. They were strange creatures who came from a world that should have killed them 1,000 times over. And they had a reputation for being unpredictable in ways that made other species nervous. Marcus stopped a few meters from Una and looked at her with his single eye. She stared back at him with all 4 of hers. Her expression caught somewhere between hope and confusion. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you help me? Because someone should, Marcus replied simply. He turned away from her and faced the Arbiter's platform. I am Marcus Cole, he announced, cargo handler, citizen of Earth, and I claim the right to serve as champion for the accused. The Arbiter consulted something on the console before him. Your claim is recognized, the Senate said. But I must warn you that if you fail in your defense, you will share in the accused punishment. I understand. Lord Torvis leaned forward in his box, his golden rings catching the light as he moved. This grows tedious, he said. I invoked a trial by inquiry. A murmur ran through the crowd, and Marcus kept his expression neutral, even though he had no idea what that meant. The Arbiter raised one thin appendage. Lord Torvis has invoked a trial by inquiry, the Senate explained. This is not a trial of combat, but a trial of perception and truth. Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. He had been prepared to fight if necessary. Though fighting a Vrecken twice his size would have been a short and painful experience. 3 pieces of evidence will be presented. The Arbiter continued. Each champion will examine the evidence and present their interpretation. And I will judge which interpretation holds more truth. Marcus nodded slowly. He could work with this, back on Earth. Before he had left for the stars, he had worked as an accident investigator. For a mining company, it was his job to look at collapsed tunnels and malfunctioning equipment and figure out what had really happened versus what the company wanted people to think it happened. He had been good at it. Good enough that the company eventually found a reason to let him go. They did not like employees who saw too clearly. Lord Torvus descended from his viewing box and walked to the arena floor, his massive form making Marcus look even smaller by comparison. The Vrecken stopped across from him and smiled that too wide smile again. This will be brief, Torvus said quietly. For Marcus's ears alone. I have prepared this case for weeks, and you are just a fool who wandered in from the loading docks. Maybe, Marcus replied. But fools sometimes see things that clever people miss. Torvus snorted and turned to face the Arbiter. Present the first evidence. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the arena, showing security footage from what appeared to be a warehouse. The image was grainy but clear, enough to show a figure moving through the rows of storage containers. The figure had 4 eyes that reflected the dim lighting. This footage was captured 3 nights ago in my warehouse, Torvus declared. It clearly shows a Visari entering the restricted area where my crystals were stored. The crowd murmured in agreement. The footage did seem conclusive. A 4-eyed alien in a Visari warehouse. What more proof did anyone need? But Marcus was not looking at what the crowd was looking at. He was looking at everything else. I would like to see that footage again, he said. The Arbiter gestured, and the footage replayed. Marcus watched it 3 more times, his single eye tracking details that others might overlook. He had learned long ago that when you only had 1 eye, you had to use it better than people who had 2. You had to notice shadows and angles and the small inconsistencies that revealed the truth behind appearances. The footage is clearly authentic, Torvus said impatiently. Verified by station security themselves. Verified that it came from your security system, Marcus corrected him. Not verified that it shows what actually happened. He pointed to the left side of the holographic image. The shadow of that storage container falls to the left, he said, which means the light source is coming from the right. But the overhead lights in a warehouse like this would cast shadows straight down. The crowd went quiet. The shadow angle only makes sense if the footage was recorded during a different time of day. Marcus continued. When light from the station's observation windows would have entered from the side. He pointed to another part of the image. And here, the timestamp shows 2300 hours. But the reflection in this metal panel shows daylight from the windows. Marcus turned to face the Arbiter. This footage has been edited, he said. Images from different times have been spliced together to create something that never actually happened. Torvus's smile had disappeared. This is ridiculous, the Vrecken snarled. The human is seeing things that are not there. Perhaps, the Arbiter said calmly, but his observations are logical, and we will continue to the second evidence. A witness was brought forward. A Dranaki dock worker named Fen, who shuffled nervously as he took his place before the Arbiter. The Dranaki were small reptilian creatures with large hands and poor eyesight, evolved on a world of bright deserts where they had developed sensitivity to heat rather than light. Tell us what you saw, Torvus commanded. I was working late, Fen said, his voice thin and reedy, and I saw someone running from the warehouse, someone with 4 eyes. I am certain of it. How can you be certain? Marcus asked. Fen blinked his small eyes rapidly. because I saw her," he said. "I saw the four eyes. What were the lighting conditions that night?" Fen hesitated. "It was dark," he admitted. "But I still saw." Marcus took a step closer to the witness. "Dranaki have poor night vision," he said gently. "Your species evolved to see in bright light, not darkness. So, how did you identify anyone in conditions where you could barely see at all?" The dockworker's mouth opened and closed several times. I thought I saw," he stammered. "You thought," Marcus repeated, "or you were told what to think." Fen's eyes darted toward Lord Torvus, and in that brief glance Marcus saw everything he needed to know. This witness had been paid or threatened or both. The Arbiter saw it too. The witness's testimony is noted, but questionable. The Senate declared, "We will proceed to the final evidence." Lord Torvus had stopped. Smiling entirely now, his scaled face had taken on dangerous expression that made Marcus acutely aware of just how large and how powerful the reckon was. But they were in a public arena surrounded by thousands of witnesses, even a being as wealthy as Torvus would not risk violence here, or so Marcus hoped. "Present the final evidence," the Arbiter commanded. A holographic document appeared in the air. A manifest showing a list of goods and a location. "This document proves that the stolen crystals were found in the Vasari girl's quarters," Torvus said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "She cannot deny that." Marcus studied the document carefully. His single eye moved across every line, every date, every authentication seal. And there it was. "This manifest was authenticated on the 2nd day of this month," Marcus said. "But the theft allegedly occurred on the 5th day." He turned to face the crowd. "Someone created this document before the crime even happened," he said. "Someone who knew exactly what was going to be stolen and exactly who was going to be blamed." The arena erupted in noise. Some were shouting in outrage, while others were demanding explanations in the chaos. Marcus looked back at Una and saw something he had not seen before. Hope, real hope. The arena roared with cruel laughter, and Una stood alone in the center of it all. She was young by the Sari standards, barely 20 cycles old, and her 4 violet eyes blinked rapidly as she tried to hold back tears that would only make things worse. The Valora Tribunal Arena on Nexus Prime was designed to humiliate as much as it was designed to judge. And today it was succeeding perfectly. Thousands of aliens from dozens of species packed the curved seating that rose in tiers around the May central platform where she stood. Their voices merged into a wall of mockery that pressed against her from every direction. "Look at those eyes," someone shouted from the lower rows. Like a spider crawled onto her face and died there. More laughter followed, and Una wrapped her thin arms around herself as if she could become small enough to disappear. Her 4 eyes were arranged in a diamond pattern on her pale blue face. 2, where most species had them, and 2 more positioned above and below. They were perfectly natural for her people. An evolutionary gift from a homeworld where the sun barely rose above the horizon and every scrap of light needed to be captured. But here in the bright lights of the arena, surrounded by species who had never seen a Zasari before last month, her eyes made her a freak. The Zasari had only recently made contact with the Galactic Concord. They had traveled for generations on their slow colony ship, hoping to find allies among the stars, hoping to share their knowledge and culture with new friends. Instead, they had found a galaxy that looked at them with disgust. Una had been one of the first to venture beyond their ship and into the station, eager to explore and learn. That eagerness had been her mistake. "The accused will face the Arbiter," a mechanical voice announced, and Una forced herself to look up at the floating platform where the Arbiter hovered. The Arbiter was a Zenith, a species known for their supposed impartiality. Though Una had learned that impartiality meant nothing when everyone already believed you were guilty. You stand accused of theft. the Arbiter declared. By Lord Torvas of the Vrecken Merchant Coalition. A section of the crowd erupted in cheers, and Una turned her 4 eyes toward the source. Lord Torvas sat in a private viewing box draped in expensive fabrics. His scaled face twisted into a smile that showed too many teeth. He was massive, even by Vrecken standards. His wealth displayed in the golden rings that circled his horns and the jeweled chains that hung across his chest. He had accused her of stealing a crate of rare crystals from his warehouse 3 nights ago. She had never even been to his warehouse. She had never stolen anything in her life, but Lord Torvas had witnesses who said otherwise, documents that proved otherwise, and enough money to make the truth irrelevant. How do you answer these charges? The Arbiter asked. I am innocent, Una said, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. The crowd laughed again. Of course she would say that. What else would a 4-eyed thief say? Lord Torvas has provided substantial evidence of your guilt, the Arbiter continued, and you have provided nothing in your defense. Because I have nothing, Una replied, her voice cracking. I did not do this thing, and I do not know how to prove something did not happen. Then you may call upon a champion to speak for you, the Arbiter said, as is your right under Concord law. Una almost laughed at that. A champion was someone who would stand beside the accused and challenge the evidence. A champion was someone willing to stake their own reputation on another being's innocence, who in this entire station would stand beside Avisari. Her own people were still confined to their ship, not yet granted the status that would allow them to participate in Concord proceedings. She was alone. I call for any champion to come forward, the Arbiter announced to the arena. Any being willing to speak for the accused may now present themselves. Silence fell over the crowd. It was a different kind of silence than before. Not the anticipatory quiet that came before an execution, but the uncomfortable silence of beings looking anywhere except at the desperate girl in the center of the arena. Una's 4 eyes scanned the crowd, moving independently as they searched for anyone who might meet her gaze. No one did. Even the species who prided themselves on justice and fairness suddenly found their communication devices very interesting. In the upper galleries, far from the wealthy boxes and the comfortable seating, Marcus Cole watched everything with his single remaining eye. He was 53 years old and looked every day of it. His face weathered by decades of hard labor in places where hard labor was the only thing that kept you alive. His left eye was covered by a simple black patch, the socket beneath it scarred from a mining accident 15 years ago. He had been pulling ore from an asteroid when the tunnel collapsed. His coworker had frozen in panic. Unable to move as tons of rock fell toward him, Marcus had shoved the man clear and taken the worst of it himself. He had saved a life that day and lost his eye. No one had thanked him. No one had paid his medical bills. The company had simply transferred him to lighter duty and docked his wages for the time he spent recovering. He had learned then what it meant to be invisible, to be the kind of person the galaxy simply looked through on its way to somewhere more important. Now he hauled cargo on Nexus Prime, loading and unloading crates that were worth more than he would earn in a Tadev's lifetime. He ate alone and slept alone and spoke to almost no one. He was exactly the kind of person who should mind his own business and stay out of trouble. But as he watched the 4-eyed girl standing alone in that arena, something old and stubborn stirred in his chest. He knew that look on her face. He had worn it himself once, standing in a company office while executives explained why his injury was his own fault. He had worn it again when his wife left because she could not stand looking at his ruined face. He had worn it every time someone glanced at his eye patch and then quickly looked away as if his disfigurement might be contagious. The arbiter called out one more time. Is there no champion who will speak for the accused? The silence stretched on Lord Torvis, leaned back in his viewing box, and smiled wider. In a few moments, the arbiter would declare the trial concluded. The girl would be sentenced to indentured servitude, probably in the mines where beings like her worked. Until they stopped being useful, it was none of his business. It was absolutely none of his business. Marcus stood up, and his voice carried across the arena before he even realized he had opened his mouth. I will speak for her. Every eye in the arena turned toward the upper gallery, where a one-eyed human in worn work clothes had just volunteered to defend a four-eyed freak. The silence that followed was somehow louder than all the mockery that had come before.